Well, yeah, there we go. Well, good morning, everybody. It's our first day as a committee working.
This week.
Yeah, yesterday, if anybody's listening, wondered where we were yesterday, we were on the Senate floor. So it's Wednesday, March 29th, and we're full committee here. And, we have Michael Lady with us, and the first thing we're gonna chat about is our right to farm bill. And if you were gonna comment on what Brian,
I can walk through what Senator Campaign says.
yeah, and but we need to be moving on that particular issue. And so, morning, Michael.
Morning.
And if you'd like to get started on that.
Sure. So, Senator Campaign, do you want to run it?
So I would just say, if it works for the chair, what I did was I pulled together some language after talking to a few people about what we might look at for right to farm if the committee is interested in moving this direction. I also know that the majority of the committee would like to pass the bill as is. Of course, I completely respect that as well. And so just another option, I would say, if the committee is interested.
And is that language?
In that language, Mr. O'Grady has. Yeah, it's right here.
It's, I guess Linda gave it to you.
Yep.
I gave.
No, she gave us the.
The last one.
Well, it's on, it's not on. I did send it to you.
Oh, this morning?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find it.
At least I thought I did.
But we did receive that draft for 424.
220.
224.
Yes,
That's the last year.
Yeah.
that's the last version that the committee has looked at. But then Senator Campion, let me just make sure that it's sent to Linda.
Do you want me to show it?
Do you have it there?
Yes.
Yeah, let us second. If you can put it up, that'd be great.
And I'll send that.
It's just my tweet instead of.
Major changes and send it back to you. I'm sure.
That's great.
We were whispering a little bit.
No, it's State College.
Is this it here?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So what you see is a study committee that would replace the substance of the bill, the substance of your last draft, 24, draft 4.1. And the committee would be established to review current law in Vermont, protect farmers from nuisance lawsuits, and to determine whether changes to law are necessary, both to ensure protection of reasonable activities conducted on the farm, among work and nuisance lawsuits, and to ensure protection of health, welfare, and property. The subsection B is membership. There'd be 2 members of the House, one from Committee on Ag, one from the Committee on Judiciary, similarly 2 members of the Senate, one from the Committee on Ag, one from the Committee on Judiciary, and the Secretary of Ag or designee, and Secretary of Natural Resources or designee, 1 farmer representing an MFO or an LFO or organization representing them, 2 farmers representing small farms, 1 appointed by the Speaker, 1 appointed by the committee. On committees, a representative of the Vermont Association for Justice, that's the new name for the Vermont Trial Lawyers, a representative of Vermont Bar Association, of the Environmental Advocacy, and then last, a representative of farm workers. So there would be approximately 13 people in the committee. The committee shall then, on its powers and duties on page 2 lines, above, compile the right to farm legal decisions in the state since January of 2013. Summarize the differences between Vermont's right to farm law, the right to farm law in other states. Summarize how right to farm laws in other states with substantial ag sectors have affected farms, the farm sectors, communities, public health, public welfare, and property rights. Review the purpose of the Vermont right to farm law and recommend changes to the purpose to reflect
Do we, when
whether to protect from farms, from unwarranted nuisance lawsuits and the need to protect the health, welfare, and property of farm neighbors, farm community members, and Vermonters. Assess whether amending the Vermont right to farm law to further limit nuisance actions would increase risk to the health, welfare, and property of Vermonters in light of Vermont's current laws and regulations, and enforcement of such laws and regulations. Assess whether changes to the current Vermont right to farm law are necessary to ensure protection of farms from unwarranted nuisance suits and to ensure protection for the health, welfare, and property of farm neighbors, farm community members, and Vermonters. And then last, if necessary, recommend changes to the current Vermont right to farm law to ensure protection of farms from unwarranted nuisance lawsuits and to ensure protection of the health, welfare, and property of farm neighbors, farm community members, and Vermonters. The committee would have assistance from the Agency of Ag, Office of Legislative Counsel. They would report to you, the General Assembly, on January 15, 2024, with their recommendations and findings. The Secretary of Ag calls the first meeting, study committee selects a chair. Study committee ceases to exist on February 1, 2024. And then both ledge and non-ledge members that are qualified for or eligible for compensation and get compensation and reimbursement for not more than 8 meetings.
I did mention it to the chair of ag, or chair of judiciary this morning, just briefly, but haven't had time to talk to anybody in detail.
any comments from the committee?
Well, I don't know if it's a comment. It seems like we're back at the starting gate, which is, I can appreciate your feelings for it. Just reading through that quickly. So you had 2 small farmers, 1 MFO, but no LFOs.
No, it's one MFO or LFO.
Okay. But more small than the others. And then why did you pick 2013 as a date?
2013, don't recall, but
Jacobs versus Ox. That's like the last big right to farm case. And it was also the last time that the right to farm was amended. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, well.
So again, I'm just putting it, well, decide whatever direction you want. Well, remember, we did have committee discussion around, hey, if you want to print some language and print some provisions.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all.
well,
Actually, Chicken versus Ox, 2003, not 2013.
Yeah, I just felt that was pretty recent. If you took a look more at 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know that that's germane anyway, but
Yeah.
my thought was that you were going to come back with maybe a couple little tweaks to what we had in the February draft so that we could move this along.
Listen,
Yeah,
no feeling, I do remember a brief discussion saying, hey, I've got some study language. If you want to look at it, I'll just bring it in. But hey, it's whatever the majority of the community wants. Totally get it.
anything that your hand?
Number one, I don't want to restudy it, so. So I can't vote for this,
Yeah.
that somebody else on this committee will do this one. I'm not willing to revisit all this, because I feel like a lot of this is familiar. I feel like we've been through some court cases. I feel like we've talked to the firm. So personally, I want to spend my summer redoing this, because I feel like we've talked about this quite a lot.
So you feel like the committee process was the study?
wasn't
No,
as
which could be,
intense or
yeah,
robust,
yeah.
but I personally don't want to relive it.
Right.
And that's just me. Maybe somebody else here wants to do it, and if you do, great, but I don't know that I can support this if I'm not willing to do the legwork. And second of all, I'll go right back to what I've been saying, I think all along, is that if judiciary has a problem with any part of this law, which apparently they did the last time it was sent to them in a different format, we can talk to judiciary, find out what their hangups are. Because I don't want to have a whole study committee go through 8 months of something, and then judiciary go, sorry, you missed line 3. This has been our problem for the last 3 years. I want to address whatever problem judiciary has. If they have a problem, and if they don't have a problem,
Wow.
great, but then we're solving for something that's not a problem, but I want to know what judiciary's issues are, and maybe it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I want to have that conversation with them, because otherwise we're just kicking it down the, you know, street
Van down
or
the road.
another, yeah, thank you.
Do you want
Down the
to,
road.
do you want to reach out to them?
Sure.
I mean, if
Wow.
that's one of the things that you're particularly interested in.
I don't know that I have the right to do that, but whatever, I want to have either movement on it, or I want to know that we're gonna have direct quality funds. I don't want to go through a study committee only to find out judiciary has the same problems that they've had forever, which is they say that this is something that they want to ever pass in any form, and maybe that's not true, I just don't know what that is.
Well, the issue is that the study committee.
Yeah.
It's loaded one-sided. You know, you've got trial lawyers in there and A&R, and I mean, there's no way you would ever get a decent vote out of that committee, because the trial lawyers want to have everything so that they can sue each other and make money. I mean, that's judiciary's biggest problem, is the trial attorneys go in there and argue like heck against any bill that's gonna give somebody a little leg up, because they want to be able to sue them. And I almost think, and I've accused my good buddy Dan Smith of this in the past, that I think before they leave college or get signed on to the bar, they have to take an oath of office saying, yes, I like suing people. And because there's no resolving cases. I mean, I spent a little time dealing with lawyers, and they love suing the opposition, and then they'll counter sue, and you end up spending thousands of dollars, and you really don't get any results, any favorable results either way. The only ones that get good results are them, because they get a pocket full of money. And that's why I think the mediation part of our bill is probably the best part of our bill. It tries to get the two sides together with a mediator that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to get it resolved. And in most of the cases, I mean, we've only had, do you know, Michael, how many cases?
It's not that many.
I mean, it's a few, very few cases over the years, because they do get resolved for the most part. And it's the purpose of our bill, as far as I'm concerned, was to just try to bring it up to date, because it's been 18, I guess, 20 years since we wrote that. And things have changed. But Brian, I appreciate your work and your effort, but you didn't
Well-
spend a lot of time putting a study committee together, I don't think, because it's loaded on one side.
Well, here's the thing, and I would just pass it out 4-1. I mean, the bill hasn't gone anywhere in years, frankly. I mean, we all know it's not gonna get through judiciary. The House isn't interested. So I would just pass it out and not wait to get, that's my gut. I mean, I'm just trying to put some things on the table that frankly seem to be holding it up every year. Last year it left 3-2, didn't go to judiciary. This year it'll be 4-1. he'll go judiciary. I mean, that's what I'm just trying to do. I'm trying to figure out where are some of these problems. Listen, if the committee wants to move it, the committee wants to move it. I just said I would put forward my questions and there they are.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, and I was I thought you might have had one or two little hangups with it, and I didn't realize you were gonna do it.
Well, listen, we could, it depends. I mean, frankly, if the committee wants to move in this direction, but it doesn't sound like it does, there are different options that could be done to the study committee. I wasn't thinking we voted out today, but move in that direction. But if the committee doesn't want to do study committee, hey, that's completely fine. And I would just pass out the bill 4-1 and see what happens. That's my gut.
Yeah. Well, certainly,
Or have Irene go down and talk to judiciary and get the answers that you need to get, frankly. I mean, any senator can go down and talk to them and say, what's the hang up? I'm not stopping you.
well, I already have, I've talked to the chair.
Right, yeah, I don't know that, the answer to that question.
Well, he says the trial lawyers come in and beat up on it all the time because, it's too many unanswered or too many questions that are open but I figured the way we had it set up, I mean, hell, I'll leave it the way it is before I would take on a study. I mean, we don't need to study the issue. We already know what the issue is.
I would make a motion and move it if I were you then.
Well, you can make a motion.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if that's what you want to do, move the bill today, 4-1, in its original format.
Well, what do you voice your opinion?
We're stuck. We're stuck. I think something needs to be done. I think you hit right on it. Is there any way that judiciary can see themselves at all? And if not, let's send it out and it'll get stuck on the wall in judiciary and that's as good as we can do this year.
Well,
I do think though, personally, I do think going forward, this is going to become more and more of an issue. We're becoming more and more of a place where in the rural countryside, there are more and more suburban and urban people that don't have a background with agriculture. And it's going to come up. I wish we could be proactive about it. I don't know.
So Bobby, I don't think that we made drastic changes to this bill, but it's been a long session so far, so maybe I'm forgetting. I know we added mediation. Is judiciary position that we just don't need a right to farm law? Would they not have passed out of their committee the 2003 law? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, are they against right to farm laws in general, that they just won't even add this little tweak that I see in the new language, or what's your sense of this?
well, no, they take testimony on it, and the trial lawyers go and beat up on it. and
Okay.
So then they sit around the room and say, well, there's a lot of anti-lawyers
Okay.
and they don't ask them to leave and then make a decision, but
So in my view, it comes down to just two potential paths. We can either vote it out this year, anticipating that it might reach the next room down the hall and stay on the wall, or we can just hold on to it. As you pointed out the last time we talked about this, it's still a live bill next year. And we could take it up again and maybe by then feelings change, or we can get some further direction from the judiciary committee, how we could change it. I guess what I'm saying, I don't think we need a study with all due respect.
Yeah, I'm taking it, so.
So to me, it's either pass it out the way it is and hope for the best, or just put it back on our wall and we could talk about it next year.
Well, why don't we run through the draft 4.1 and have Michael run through that with us and we'll be thinking about our options. And then, see, I believe the only way judiciary gets this bill is by requesting. Doesn't automatically go there, right?
No, it won't. It would have to be moved on the floor. It'll go out to the floor for notice. And somebody can move the next day to commit it to Senate Judiciary.
Yeah, so, you know, it isn't like an appropriations bill or a tax bill where,
No, I understand that.
yeah, so why don't we run through, the changes that Michael has?
And should I put it on the screen or?
We've all got a copy.
We have a copy.
Okay. All right, so you can go to page 2. It was originally drafted as a bill from Senator Starr, but it's now a committee bill. You'll see we're amending on page 2 the entire chapter in Title 12, that is the right to farm law. Purpose is not being changed, but I just want to focus on the last few sentences of the purpose section, page 2, beginning of line 18. General Assembly finds that agricultural activities are potentially subject to lawsuits based on the theory of nuisance. These suits encourage and could force the premature removal of the farmlands and other farm resources from agricultural use. It's the purpose of this chapter to protect reasonable agricultural activities conducted on the farm from nuisance lawsuits.
That's current language, so correct?
Language not changing, but that is the purpose of this chapter. Page 3, section 5752, there's being a new definition is being added at the bottom of the page going on to page 4. Generally accepted agricultural practices. These are defined as the requirements of 6 VSA chapter 215, which is the agricultural water quality requirements. That's where the RAPs are, that's where the MSO permit is, that's where the LFO rules are. It would also mean the requirements of the Agency of Ag's rule for control of pesticides, and it would be practices conducted in a manner consistent with proper and accepted customs and standards, followed by similar operators of agricultural activities in the state. Now that definition is important because on page 4, line 8, section 5753, you are changing the standard for what the nuisance protection is. Because right now, agricultural activities are entitled to a rebuttable presumption that the activity does not constitute a nuisance if it can prove all of the following. It's conducted in conformity with federal, state, and local laws. It's consistent with good agricultural practices, and it's established prior to surrounding non-ag activities, and it has significantly changed since the commencement of the prior surrounding non-ag activity. So that's what a farmer has to show in order to qualify for nuisance protection. All of those are very fact dependent, so it's very subject to debate in front of the court. And in addition to that, in addition to what a farmer has to show, that presumption that it is not a nuisance can be overcome by showing that the ag activity has a substantial adverse effect on health, safety, or welfare, or has a noxious and significant interference with use and enjoyment of the neighboring property. So even if the farm can show that it qualifies for the nuisance, the neighbor can overcome that presumption against nuisance by showing adverse effect on health, safety, or welfare, noxious and insignificant interference with use and enjoyment. And that is what makes Vermont's law less protective than other right to farm laws across the country. Not only is it the factual determination that needs to be made in order to qualify, but the ability, once that has been made, to overcome that say that that nuisance protection does not apply. Most states don't have something like that. And the state that this was modeled on back in 2003 was Iowa. Iowa has since changed their law to say that that's not the standard in their state anymore. And the Supreme Court in Iowa has upheld their right to farm law against the allegations that it was the case. So
As it is today.
as it is today,
In this copy's theirs.
no. What is proposed in front of you today is not Iowa's law. It is basically, well, it's really what you have determined. It started off as kind of a combination of Arkansas and Michigan, but it's been refined to get rid of some of the provisions in the Arkansas and Michigan bill that you didn't think were necessary, like the farm has to be in
Oh, the one.
1 year. So now what you're proposing is no agricultural activity shall be or become a nuisance or trespass when the activity is conducted in accordance with generally accepted agricultural practices. So what you just saw in that definition, it's compliant with the ag water quality requirements, it's compliant with the control pesticides rule, and it is a practice conducted in a manner consistent with proper and accepted customs and standards filed by similar operators of ag activities in the state. I will acknowledge that that third criteria is a fact determination. It is something that will be put before a court, especially in the first few times that the standard would be litigated, for a court to determine what is going to be that proper and accepted customs and standards. Once a court addresses that, and maybe addresses it a few times, that should probably become a standard determination. So the first few cases will be very fact dependent, and later on, once a court has made that kind of holding, I think it will be easier for a court to show that standard. Compliance with that standard. So another aspect of this is that on page 5, lines 7 through 10, the plaintiff alleging that an ag activity is a nuisance for trespass shall be burdened of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that the ag activity is not conducted in accordance with the accepted agricultural practice. Because right now, in order for that farm to qualify, it has to show it's in conformity with state and federal law. It's established prior to the non-surrounding area. It has not significantly changed. And it really kind of, right now, the part of the burden is on the farm and not the plaintiff. And this is clearly saying that the plaintiff alleging that the ag activity is a nuisance, they are the one that has the burden. They have to show by a preponderance of an evidence that it's not in accordance with generally accepted agricultural practices.
So that should give lawyers plenty of work to do.
Right. I mean, one of the criticisms against the 1 year provision that was in the bill that in your original draft is that it would have taken away a remedy after that 1 year. Right. And now the remedy is still there. The plaintiff just has to show that the farm is not being conducted according to its generally accepted agricultural practices.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, Michael, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't have to sign that thing that we're starting.
Nobody will admit.
The current, it's just my opinion, and you can steer me if I'm phrasing this incorrectly. The way the current language is structured seems to me to put the burden on the farmer to prove that he or she's not messing up, excuse me for using messing up, but whatever. And this bill with our added changes seems to shift that over to whoever might want to go after the farmer for whatever reason. I don't know the degree to which it shifts the burden, but to me, it does. So my question is, in most normal lawsuits, if there are such things, who has to prove, whose burden is it to prove, one side or the other? Are most laws structured so that when the plaintiff comes in, since the plaintiff initiated the legal action, to me, it would make sense, they're on the hook for making sure that what they're saying is true.
In most cases, yes, the plaintiff or the enforcing entity, say the state bringing enforcement action, they have the burden of proof.
Okay.
There are times when the burden shifts to the defendant, and probably the most common one for you all is if Elcar objects to an agency rule and the agency still goes forward with adoption of that rule, then it's on the agency to defend the validity and legality of that rule if somebody brings an action. So that's probably the most common one from the context of, it's something that the legislature approves and or disapproves, and the legislature is actually the one that shifts the burden when a administrative rule comes forward.
Yeah, okay. For that reason, I thought this was a good bill because
It's
it
pretty
protects the farmer.
balanced, and the farmer has to perform
Correct.
or they're in trouble. If they don't conform to the RAPs and the pesticide issues, then
Yep.
they aren't in good order.
So the thing that I look at these two different standards, and the existing standard is so fact dependent with so many criteria involved, whether you're complying with the law, whether you were here before, whether you changed your activity, whether it's a substantial interference with health, whether it's, there's so many opportunities to defeat the nuisance protection. Here you've got to show three things, right? And so it's not like there's no factual determination by the court, but it's fewer. And it should be something that a farm, they can show that they got their pesticide certification, that they applied their pesticide according to the label and the specifications of the rule. They can show that they're complying with the RAPs. They can show they have no enforcement action against them. And then that third one, good customs and standards, that's going to be the first few cases where that's going to be probably where there's going to be some discussion and debate and determination by the court. But in time, that should be settled as the standard that the courts are going to use. And again, I don't need fewer factual determinations that a court will have to make for factual opportunities for a plaintiff to defeat the nuisance protection.
The other thing I'll mention, because I think it is a nod to the plaintiff, is that the preponderance of evidence is the least restrictive or onerous burden of proof. You go from that to clear and convincing and then beyond a reasonable doubt. So in a way, it gives a little bit of an edge back to the plaintiff that all they got to do is say, with a preponderance of evidence, this is the way we feel. So I don't know whether that's important or not, but I think it balances it to some degree.
I agree.
Maybe this is just a rhetorical question, but how do all these other states like Iowa, Arkansas, and Michigan pass a law similar to the upgrade we're looking at? Do they not have trial lawyers sitting in on their judiciary? Or is it just a personality thing here in Vermont? What is our hang up? Maybe just something to think about. Why can we, a farming state, last I checked, not be able to pass something like this? With flying colors. Maybe again, I'm too new, but I don't understand why all these big states where you would think there'd be lots of trial lawyers sitting in on the committees.
I honestly, I don't think that there's a silver bullet answer to that, because arguably the most protective right to farm laws in Oregon, which is a largely Democratic state, liberal Democratic legislature, does have a significant agricultural community, but east beyond the mountains. They're trying to like secede and join Idaho right now. And like, I don't know how they got that law because it is a very protected law. In other states like Arkansas, Louisiana, where there are significant agricultural communities and there's a conservative legislature, you can see where the agricultural influence might have more political sway into those legislatures. But when you go around the country, it's not, there's no,
Black and white kind of thing.
like, yeah,
It could have something, I know we don't want to spend time speculating on this, but maybe just the size of the state, I don't know, that ag, I don't know where Oregon's ag is, like one region or something like that, I don't know,
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
what's the clean heat standards? How
Is that
many
the bill?
states
That's
have
the one that you
approved
co-sponsored.
that?
Right, right.
Those crazies in California, maybe, but, other
For the
than-
record.
Yeah, for the record. Uh,
So,
I have nothing to hide. And if I did, I wouldn't be here. And I mean,
I see what you're saying in terms of the size, it's not
yeah, it's a little
necessarily.
state and you can convince, I mean, you can convince people to do the damnedest things here somehow. But you go up north where there's still a lot of old Vermonters, you don't get away with that stuff up there. You know, you get usually kicked right out of office and you're sitting in the bleachers listening. You come out with some of the stuff, like what you guys get away with even in Bennington. You tried going up Orleans County and getting away with that.
so
Or Chittenden County, I mean, that would be a total weight belt. No, it's a small state and people, and a lot of people don't go vote, and that's really bad. You know, do you have something, Rich?
you know, we're arguing about all of that. I still think the most appealing thing in the whole bill to me is the mediation bill. Because I think it's really hard. And we've had testimony that it doesn't, but it's really hard for a neighbor to confront another. And so other than if we didn't change anything, but in the process, we gave an option for mediation, I think that's would be huge.
Yeah, I wouldn't, we might have to resort back to maybe just doing that with the present bill.
The forced mediation.
Uh,
The forced mediation.
I mean,
If people have to talk to each other, a lot of times stuff gets sorted out.
Well, maybe, and I don't know, I mean, maybe that's gonna be the green light for judiciary, maybe that's something that they feel good about.
well,
Yeah, I don't know, honestly.
I could ask Sears about
Might
it,
as well, I don't know, I mean,
but trial lawyers aren't gonna want mediation. They wanna stay away from that.
Well, I think our judiciary committee, court time is a huge issue now.
Well, it
Look
should,
at every issue. So if this would take away from, court time,
you'd think it would be a very positive acceptance.
there are a lot of mediators out there, and it seems to be more and more a thing.
I hadn't even thought about that, Richard. That's an interesting suggestion. So leave
It's the
current
same.
law the way it is, And just this one little provision, put that in.
We can always come back some and have the fight about the other pieces. But I think when people get to talk, a lot of times they skip words. And there's no opportunity for people to just talk.
So what would that involve, Michael?
Well, on page 6, you'll see the new mediation requirement prior to suit.
Right.
If you just leave the current law alone, it would just apply to claims of nuisance, because right now the bill is claims of nuisance or trespass. And so a person shall not bring a court action based on a claim of nuisance arising from an ag activity unless the person and the operator of the ag activity at least once attempt to resolve through mediation the issue or dispute that the person has concerning operation of the ag activity. The mediation is conducted according to the Uniform Mediation Act. I will note the Sports Shooting Range Protection Act, which came out of Senator Sears' committee about 20 years ago, has something similar in it, and it was something that Senator Sears wanted prior to initiation of the suit. The parties to the mediation may agree upon the use of a mediator to assist in the resolution of the agreed upon issue or dispute. Parties share the cost of the mediator. Parties are unable to resolve the relevant issues. Parties may agree to submit the issue or dispute to binding arbitration. That's not a mandate, it's just a discretion. And they shall share the cost of arbitration. And a person bringing a court action based on a claim of nuisance arising from an agricultural activity shall provide the court with a sworn statement with an intent to resolve the issue or dispute with mediation.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I just following up with Senator Westman. So, Rich, are you thinking that that you're trying to bring the parties together quickly? Here's my concern. You can't go to court. You literally are saying, okay, you've got to give this a shot. You cannot.
Right.
Right. Keeps them out of the
And
courts.
can we get people to talk?
Get people-
And if that falls apart, then you
Then-
still have the right
But
to.
you. And then I would say if we did move in this direction, we have to, because I wouldn't want somebody coming and saying, hey, I met with Richie and our friend moderated, you know what I mean? It would have to be a real official,
Certified
like mediation.
mediation, right?
I think this
Okay.
sets up a mediation process. But
I get what you're saying. I mean,
I think people, I don't believe that people revel in conflict. And I think most people that are neighbors, when there's something, if it's a formal process that helps them talk about it, that would be a step in the right direction. It's not where all of us, or some of us would like to go, but can we create a way where people can talk?
stay out of court.
Yeah,
So what's the issue not including trespass?
But right now, the current law doesn't provide immunity for
Okay.
farmer or trespass action.
Okay with that.
And the proposed language would.
So would we have to alter line 11?
Yeah, you have to remove any reference to trespass in the new 5755.
I mean,
Michael, this Uniform Mediation Act that's mentioned in 515, does that specify it has to be a certified mediator or something to get away from, yeah, my friend Bill came and we joked.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, all right, so that sets up some sort of standard
yeah,
for mediation, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So there's nothing else to change.
Is that anything that the committee would interested?
I think it's worth taking
Yeah,
to
it's important.
Sears and remind him that 20 years ago he was in a mediation. And what's changed? Or has he just forgotten? You know, I mean, it's.
Well, and also, I mean, if it were just that part of it, that was the base of the bill, forcing people to come together, have a conversation through a legitimate process. mean, that, to me, gets rid of some of the, I could be wrong, farmers' concerns that they're gonna be sued automatically.
What does it do for your concerns?
Yeah, and then it also gives, and it's not closing the door, but it really kind of gives that sort of first attempt. But I guess I'm wondering if that's the part of the bill, that part of the bill is what the committee is interested in moving, just saying,
If
hey.
it brings you along, I mean.
But I mean, that's the bill, and we reach, like Senator Weston said, we return to everything else in the future, that it's that.
You can have the argument, right, but, you know, for me, it creates an option for people to talk. And a lot of times stuff gets sorted out when you talk.
Well, and restorative justice is the big thing, right? To bring parties together. Like, why wouldn't this also policy?
Yeah, just back to Senator Renner's question about, do they have to be certified? They don't have to be certified, they have to hold themselves out as providing mediation services as a business.
Okay, so it's not just your rap buddy or something.
Right.
You're calling out.
Right.
If you got plenty of
For
rap.
me, for me.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, thank you.
What's your opinion, Brian?
Well, I don't mean to label people, but it seems like we have two other people in the room that might have different opinions. So I'd like to maybe hear from them too. And I don't want to put pressure on you either. You haven't had a chance, obviously, either of you to talk to anybody else, because but that would be helpful. If one side, absolutely no way, then maybe that, but I could support Senator Westman's idea, at least right now, pending hearing from farmers and others.
Yeah.
Emma Schuldeis with Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance. Talking about the forced mediation piece, so we're not against that at all. Staying out of court and saving money is something that I think everyone would like to try and do. We just want to make sure we don't abandon any of the other language as long as, but the forced mediation piece makes a lot of sense. We're on board for that.
When you say abandon the other language, we would go back to existing law. That's what we were saying.
And then add the forced
The
mediation.
only thing we would do is add the mediation to the present law
Yeah.
at this point. But that doesn't stop us from, if this makes it through, it doesn't stop us from working on a draft, the rest of the draft next year.
The summer committee where Bobby and I meet for the summer.
Who's the mediator?
I mean, I could call Anita. Anita must have an extra room. She'd be happy to have me up there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Those summer study committees are really wonderful.
You have to bring your.
I'll bring Archie. He's got
But Archie, you'll have a friend in Benny.
Grant Benny. Yeah.
Dave.
We draft that.
Have you ever figured out if you sell gravel for $4 or $5 a yard
Yeah.
and there's 15-yard load that leaves the pit, how much money you lose? I'd rather be in the pit. I'm pretty good at counting. And what about?
So, Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee. Yes, I'd like to go back and confirm with my colleagues, but to be on its face, it seems like a solution to me, unless I'm missing something.
It's a compromise.
Forced mediation, let people come to the table, work it out. If they can't work it out, court is still an option. And we think the current laws is not broken. We think it's okay. There haven't been a lot of suits, but this will get people to the table. It might potentially not be. So, yeah, I'd love to see a new draft.
Yeah.
Are there any statistics out there that show that mediation, really does settle things, prevents people from going to court? I mean, is there something that says, hey, 50% of the people that go to mediation, no matter what it might be for, they don't end up in the court or anything like that?
I'm not aware of that off
Okay.
the top of my head. I can have research done into that. though.
I can take a look at it and see if there's anything.
Well,
Yeah.
we,
Right.
What do you think?
Well, it's an important part of the overall process, I think, the mediation part. And I mean, I thought that what we were doing was a little bit liberal to the property adjacent to the farm. And the hell with it. I mean, I don't care about giving the neighbor any extra leg up. And I think what we were doing is helping the non-farm owner get some results. But, and I mean, I thought we were being very lenient to the neighbor and requiring the farmer to be on the ball with their practices and making sure they had their, you know, commercial spray licenses and all that. But hey, if I don't have a problem with the old law. So that'd be fine with me to go with the mediation piece and let the neighbor have to prove that the farmer was really being a bad apple. I thought we were being very fair to the neighbor in our redraft, but no, I would think the mediation part would be a good step forward, and try to get it settled that way.
You know, just a quick look at, I mean, again, it depends, but a lot of mediations do prevent people from going to court.
Yeah. Because the courts are overloaded. It might be three years before they'd ever get there.
And that's just more tension between the neighbors and, you know,
And that
and there seem to be a lot of mediators out there.
yeah, but that tension
Yeah.
creates bad feelings
Yeah.
all the way around.
And I'd hate to have Richie get sued and have to spend $50,000 to defend himself. He could go talk his way out of it. Wow, what about you with your chickens? Your farm?
Your chickens must be all over
I can't believe I
town.
asked again.
I mean, I said, I wanted to be down
I
here.
thought you were.
I've lost a few chickens, but
You still have a few.
I still
That's
have a
good.
few, but I,
It's so fair game to cheese
He's
about
the
them.
closest thing to a farmer.
would you say I have less than 9, then I'm a small farm, or no, wait. I can't
The
remember.
micro farm.
Micro.
Less than 3 or so. So would you want to redraft that?
Sure.
Michael? And when-
Thinking about how I redrafted, you know, the bill in front of you, I'm amending the entire chapter, and so I show the purpose section, and I show the definition, and I show the standard. With what you're requesting, I only really need to show 57, 55.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
yeah, that, I think that's all you use, because we aren't gonna, if we don't touch the other bill itself, you just refer to it as a reference. So we'll get that done and take a look at it. You know how your work is. like-
I'll have time, because y'all are gonna be on the floor, both House and Senate, for a while today.
So,
Scheduled for tomorrow.
Hmm?
You're scheduled to be in here tomorrow.
Okay.
For another bill.
so that would work.
Yeah, I can have it tomorrow.
Review the rewrite tomorrow.
Sure.
Any other questions for?
No, I appreciate Brian's efforts. I gotta say, I wish we could have done the other, but I think this is a reasonable step.
Mediation, yeah, mediation.
Well, we'll leave that until tomorrow and we'll look at that redrive. And, hey, you know, we haven't voted anything, so.
Right.
Think about it and, you know,
And-
Brian gets sick tonight, he doesn't show up tomorrow, we can find out 401.
401.
Yeah.
And we don't want more
Brian's car
mediation.
doesn't start, or Brian's down in the bottom of the river.
He's pulled over for speeding on the way and put in jail.
No,
We're at
or
Brian's-
Brian gets called back to Bennington.
We're at Brian's funeral
His
next week.
chickens are in the walkway to the neighbor's house and the building.
And there's a lawsuit pending for.
He gets religion really fast about mediation.
So, very, very good.
All right,
Thanks, Michael.
anything else?
That, other bill that, was kind of hung up in Ways and Means, that worked out well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Absolutely.
you're welcome. Apparently A&R is gonna work with EPA. They're fine with the language now, but they're gonna come back with some sort of proposal.
But I guess they must have had to believe that you knew what you were talking
Yeah, I don't,
in the end.
every which way you turn, you run into, this doesn't apply to farming. I don't know.
I do have a question on that. So, and I don't know that we'll get it to the floor today. It's on the notice, or it's on the calendar today, but it's
Pretty far down.
way down. But the provision, and I'll just call it a fee holiday that would be in existence, and has everybody seen the finance report? So they're gonna strip the last two sections of our original bill out, say, basically, everybody that has a legal degree is gonna get together and decide whether Mike was right. I'm putting it in most bare terms. But in that interim, and then come back in a year, by the way. In the interim, they're not gonna be able to charge any of the fees. The municipality cannot charge anybody any new fees. But should it go the other way, is it kind of like with the IRS where, hey, you owe us now for last year and this year?
One of the things that you did in the bill that came out of your committee, you said you weren't gonna go back. That it was only gonna be prospective.
Okay.
I did raise,
That part's still in
no, it's not. It's just no new fee, right? And so there is no reimbursement requirement. I did raise the issue that when fees are challenged in courts and have found that it's not authorized, the courts have awarded repayment of those fees.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
For all the people that have been paying and, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Okay, I just had that question.
Mr. Chair, the
So-
other thing is, if we're all in agreement back to the right to farm mediation, if it's important for you to move, I mean, that could be put onto the House miscellaneous.
Oh, yeah,
bill,
yeah.
Right? I mean,
No, there's
we could
plenty
get
of-
that at zillion spots, it's so. Great.
Well, very good, and, we got a little bit of time,
Coffee.
before ants and.
Yeah, the prompt king comes at 10:15.
10:30.
are you gonna ask them about that?
Oh, yeah, it's.
Absolutely, that's fair game.
10:15 or 10:30?
10:30.
10:30, okay.
I don't know, is there anything else that the committee wants to bring up, right now?
I think the only thing I would say is the universal meals bill is, I don't know where that's gonna land, if they're gonna, if Bloomer sends it here or Ed, but we can partner on it.
Yeah,
They had a good vote, I guess, off the House floor.
but, I don't know, did the House do anything with it other than authorize the permanent, position
It's a
for
good
it?
question. We're having them in tomorrow to understand what they did, so.
Okay, because I think we should work, the two committees should work together on it, and if I mean, that thing rolled through the House with a voice vote. And, if, you know, if you folks get it, we could send a letter to Ed. You know, look at all, we'll review it. From Brian's point of view, he could go through it with us and then we could just, vote to send a letter of support to the Ed committee. And so,
That'd be great.
you know.
Yeah.
So that would give us, you got 5.
We've got 5.
We got 5, that's 10, right?
That's a third.
Yeah, that, we
I
only
know you
need
don't have
6 more votes and, which, sure.
We're gonna have.
we can-
I think I think a lot of people. want
Your
it.
colleagues, how are they?
They're probably no,
Okay.
and, because it is going to, as I understand it, I don't know whether anyone's gotten to this point, it'll probably put a 3-cent property tax increase. Is what I'm led to believe, because it's around a $29-30 million deal.
I don't see where, I mean, they're carrying millions in surplus in the Ed fund. I don't see how it's gonna,
Well, yeah, but there are other pressures in the buildings that pass some other stuff that's gonna pretty well clean up the cake, I think. Anyway, the answer to your question is, they probably can make a case for not raising taxes. Because, you know, the argument is, yeah, but what about people that make, and pick your number, 180,000, 200,000 a year, their kids are gonna get, and to me, that we're beyond that.
I do.
And that's fine,
Yeah.
but I'm still gonna vote for the bill because I
Thank you.
was with you all the way. And if I get blasted at home, I get blasted at home. That's
Well,
just,
thanks.
I
I
think
think
it's the
it's a
right thing
great,
to
I
do.
think it's a great bill.
it
Bobby's been
didn't
20
have
years in
any tax, I didn't have any tax increase in it. Of the house,
No, I mean, if it's going to the Ed fund though, that's what they're,
Yeah.
that's what they're.
and, yeah, it would make, if you took the 30 million out and had to raise it, it might be 3 pennies. But, there's no need to raise any, there's did you see our revenues, how strong they were?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Last, month and quarter, I mean,
But I'm looking ahead to a year or 2 years down the road, we're still gonna have to pay for it. And it may not be as strong in terms of revenue, you know, down the road. I think we're gonna,
but if that's the case, then you decide whether it should be the football team that gets booted or the basketball team or the field hockey team or the history program in school. I mean, I think feeding the children is important as,
I agree.
I don't know if I told you guys at town meeting, I was talking with the school principal and asked him how that free and reduced hot lunch was going. And I know I told you that I instituted that way back when I was on the
Oh, that's
school
right,
board.
right.
He said, well, it didn't make much of a difference to us because we still give free, we've always given free lunch ever since you started it.
Isn't it?
And I thought they'd gone away from it, worked it right through their school
That's
budget.
interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys had
That's
town
interesting.
meetings like us little towns, but people get right into it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that damn school budget rolled through. I mean, people were all happy with
That's
it.
great.
Even this year it was great.
This
Yeah,
year
that's
at
great.
town meeting.
Yeah.
And I think there was 3 different people that spoke to me about how wonderful that universal meals program was. And I said, well, the way I understand it, your kids have been eating free anyways. And they said, well, they have, but this reassures us that it'll be, you know, long term.
Yeah.
Nice.
And,
It's a great thing.
yeah, so.
And think about all those kids for so many years have been eating lunch because
Well, I wondered,
it's huge.
are we still like? But anyways, no, it's worked, it's worked well and I can't even remember how I sold that. But I know the agent ran away with the money twice and I was chair of the board and I said, this is gonna stop. And I said, if the agent's running away with the money, that means there's no money, that the kids, their money's all been taken. We'll end that whole deal and the school boards, the other two members, what'd you say? I said, we'll have free hot lunch for our kids. We'll pay it, add it right. It costs us like 20 cents on the dollar. 80% of our money was coming out of the Miller formula. And
Oh, I remember that.
yeah, oh,
Miller
that was a good formula. And, I mean, we built new schools and buses and, yeah, no,
Yeah.
That's something you do.
well, we'll take a little break.
Okay.